day, isn't it? Beautiful day, wonderful day. I'm Liz Remmerswaal, and I'm from New Zealand, and I'm moderating the next panel. And before we start, Edward Morgan would just like to say a few words about the rally tomorrow to you.
Yeah, hello all. Just to put people's minds at rest about the peace rally tomorrow. First of all, there'll be a bus leaving from here, I think about 2:15 p.m. out to Shannon Airport. On these sort of occasions, let's say we don't do arrestable type offences, so it will be very much a peaceful, non-violent, non-confrontational type of peace rally. We will begin at our peace park where we'll be stopping. We may well be stopped from going to the airport at the police barrier. That's fairly normal procedure. We probably will walk up as far as the police barrier and have a word with the police, because they are also complicit in what's happening in Shannon and indirectly what's happening in the Middle East. So it'll be a nice, peaceful, non-violent and non-confrontational peace rally, and hopefully you will all enjoy it. We've also organised the weather, so the weather will be assured, my God, will be quite pleasant also. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edward, and it's going to be a wonderful day tomorrow. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic weather, definitely. I just want to say my family comes from here. I'm actually a Kerry girl, just the next county over. And yesterday I visited the two churches where my great-great-grandparents were married in Limerick. John O'Connor they got married in the Catholic Cathedral, and also he's marrying Anne Taylor, who was Anglo-Protestant. They also got married in St Mary's Cathedral in 1801. So you can see what happens when that happens. Okay, so welcome again to everybody, and we've got a fantastic panel today, and we're going to be starting with Dr. Foad Izadi, who has flown in from Iran, from Tehran University. So what we're going to be talking about is human and environmental rights, sanctions, wars and refugees, a very sort of serious subject. And we're very, very pleased to have Foad here, Dr. Izadi, because he only got his visa like 2 days ago, I think. It's been tricky getting visas. He has a great deal of experience in the area of US and Iranian relations. He works in the Department of American Studies and Faculty of World Studies, and he also spent, I think, about 20 years in the US studying there as well. And I've got to say, I've just been to Iran and I've met his beautiful wife and 4 fantastic daughters, so I've been very, very lucky. So here you are. Foad, would you like to go this way?
Okay, can you hear me? Very good. So I have only 15 minutes, and that's not a lot of time to cover what I'm going to talk about, so I'm going to be fast. And thank the organizers for allowing me to be here today, and thank you for not going to sleep after lunch and coming and listening to me. I'm going to go through a brief history of US-Iran relations. One of the topics that our panel is going to deal with is the issue of sanctions. And Iran has been dealing with sanctions for the last 4 years. And we have a lot of people that are hurting. We have people that are basically facing serious problems because they are not allowed basically to engage in economic activities with the outside world. Iran is an oil producing country, And because of US sanctions, the country cannot sell oil. So the official rate of oil sale today is zero. No, what the people are getting is sort of going down on sanctions and selling a little bit, but not too much. So this is a major problem. And it did not start today or yesterday. US policy towards Iran has been hostile dating back many years. And it started even before you had the current government. It started in 1953. The problem that Iran has is oil. And since the country has lots of oil, we have governments like the US government interested in sort of controlling who is in charge there, who is running the country. And that's why maybe that Iran was the first country that experienced a CIA coup in 1953. The second country was Guatemala in 1954. So we have this distinction of actually providing a setting for CIA officers to experience how to do a coup. And they were successful in Iran, and they engaged in that type of activities for many years to come. This is the prime minister that Iran had in 1953, Mohammad Mossadegh. He was not a religious radical. He did not have ballistic missiles. He did not engage in human rights violations. He did not support terrorism, the accusations that Iran has now. But they still managed to sort of overthrow his government. And the only problem that he had was that he was telling the British government, that is not very far from here, that they need to settle for a 50-50 share of Iranian oil sale profits. So before 1953, the UK government was running Iranian oil industry on their own, and they were giving Iran 16% of the profit. So what Mossadegh asked the UK government, since this is Iranian oil, maybe you want to increase that to 50%? And they said no. And then he said, how about 25%? And they said no. So they said that 16%, that's going to be it. And then when he nationalized Iranian oil, they overthrew his government with the help of the US government. This is the king that Iran had. Not a very popular man. He came into power after the coup, and he engaged in a lot of activities that are considered to be human rights violations in major ways, killing people, imprisoning people, doing bad stuff. He had good relations with the United States. All presidents liked him because he was doing what he was told. He was obedient, and he was basically in line with. We have one person here that actually was at the scene. Yes, he was telling me the DW's Japan representative. He was in DC when he was 10 years old, and he was there when the shock came, and we had Iranian students demonstrating, and the Capitol Police used tear gas to disperse the demonstrators, and the wind blew the opposite way, so everybody was crying because of the Capitol Police tear gas at that time. Let me go quicker because we don't have that much time. In the 1970s, the US government encouraged Shah's government to build many nuclear power reactors. They were saying that although Iran has oil, Iran will run out of oil sooner or later, So the idea was to build nuclear power plants to basically make sure the country doesn't run out of energy at that time. This is during Shah's time. Of course, they wanted to sign billion-dollar contracts of actually US companies building them. I'm going to go fast since we don't have time. Iran was basically a policeman in that part of the world. So when in Oman there were disturbances, under request of the US government, Shah sent troops to Oman and basically saved the monarch in 1970s. He liked gold and lots of jewelry, and so Iran was not a very rich country, but the Shah was quite rich and sort of had this type of experience that you can tell. When you sort of put pressure on people for a long time and cause difficulties for people, you get to be overthrown, and that's what happened to the Shah. People got tired of his policies, and so there was this 1979 revolution. Shah is gone. This is what you see in Farsi. Shah Raft means Shah is gone. People celebrated. You had the issue of the embassy takeover at that time, and this came about after Iranian students realized that the Shah was going to be taken into the United States. They thought maybe the CIA is going to do in 1979 what they did in 1953, organize another coup. And they said that how the US would do that, they said they would do it through the US Embassy. So they had this idea of taking over the US Embassy. So this is the original Occupy movement, more or less. Of course, there are some differences. They are not exactly the same. But they occupied the US Embassy to make sure that that embassy does not engage in another coup. There is this saying in the United States, you fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. They didn't want to sort of experience the same type of experience they had in 1953. I'm not trying to justify what they did, but this is the mentality that they had at that time. Then you had the Algiers Accord in 1980, sort of trying to settle difficulties. This man, Brzezinski, he actually became sort of a liberal towards the end of his life, but in the 1970s and 1980s he was quite hawkish on Iran, and he supported the Shah until the last minute. And then you had the Iran-Iraq war. What happened at that time was that, given the fact that Iran was this revolutionary type of government, we had the monarchies in the Persian Gulf and the Arab world that thought if Shah could be overthrown, then they may be next. So they supported Saddam Hussein to attack Iran militarily, and that's what happened. And then I'm just, as you see, I'm skipping over a lot of the stuff. I'm just showing you the pictures because we have, take it easy. If we have time towards question and answer, we'll do that. But so Saddam attacked Iran using billions of dollars that he got from Saudi Arabia and UAE and other countries that gave him oil money to attack Iran. This is war is devastating, and so we need to thank people like David and Leah and others, Greta, that are working to end wars. Because when you have wars, you're going to have lots of people killed. I like the sentence that's on David's T-shirt. The first casualty of war is truth, and then many civilians. So that's what you get. You get lots of people killed. 8 years of war. There are different estimates on how many people got killed. We have 1 million. We have some estimates that are lower, but that was quite difficult. They had the use of chemical weapons. What the U.S. government used to do at that time was to use satellite images that U.S. AVAX planes have, sort of take pictures of Iranian troops and sort of Iranian cities, and would give that to Saddam Hussein. They were close allies at that time. And the Iraqi government would use those pictures to use chemical weapons to attack those people, and then the next day the US government would take another set of pictures and give it to Saddam to see whether he was successful in hitting the places that he wanted to hit. And so that resulted in lots of people getting killed, and we have people in Iran today that when you talk to them, you cannot hear them well because they are still suffering from chemical weapon difficulties that they have. You never can get over chemical weapons. If you're affected, we have some physicians in the room that may testify for that chemical weapons are ugly stuff. Let me sort of move forward and not go through the PowerPoint. So we had the Bush senior administration after the war, Iran-Iraq war, and then we had the Clinton administration, and then we had Bush Jr. And all these U.S. government officials basically had this policy of containment. And what they meant by containment was we put a lot of pressure on Iran, trying to change the government of Iran, trying to basically have a government that listens to us. That's the basic idea. And in the Obama administration, the US government realized that that type of pressure after pressure after pressure is not really giving the results that the US government was interested in. So they had this idea of reaching, I'm running out of time, we had this idea of reaching an agreement with Iran on the nuclear program. So Iran basically gave up its nuclear program, and the Obama administration promised to lift sanctions. And the agreement worked for about a year or so until President Trump came into office. And I'm not sure if President Trump has read the agreement even today. He doesn't read very much. But he was against the agreement because he was against Obama. And since this was an Obama achievement, then he wanted to get rid of it. And that's what he did. About 1.5 years ago, the US officially got out of the agreement. And the end result is more sanctions, more devastation, more difficulties. People in Iran actually have the money to buy stuff, but they cannot, because they cannot use the banking system, international banking system, to do that. Yesterday, when I came in, the hotel here asked for a credit card, and people who live in Iran don't have credit cards because companies are American companies or European companies, and they cannot issue credit cards to us. So we had to get David to fix that problem. So we have difficult. This is a very small problem. It's not a big problem. People actually suffering because of the sanctions. The Trump policy obviously is not successful. You had John Bolton predicting that the Islamic Republic would not see its 40th anniversary, which was last year. And Bolton is out, but they haven't achieved this regime change policy goal yet. And they're not getting any concessions out of Iran. They're actually losing the concessions they got out of the nuclear agreement. And the idea of attacking Iran militarily is also not a good idea. A lot of people understand it. Since my time is up, let me give you my telephone number. If any of you have any questions on Iran, since I teach at University of Tehran, I'll be happy to give you the answers that I think phone works. country code is 98. Then 912 82 36 800. Country code 98 912 82 36 800. I'll be happy to be in touch with you through WhatsApp or email. I have some cards with my email. I'm not going to go through my email here. It's going to be difficult. But see me if you think I didn't have enough time to do more, and I really don't have time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Next we have Dr. Hakim Young, who is a medical doctor from Singapore who's done humanitarian and social enterprise work in Afghanistan for more than 10 years, and including being a mentor to the Afghan peace volunteers, a group of young Afghans dedicated to building non-violent alternatives to war. He's received several awards, including a Peace Prize and a Merit Award for contributions to social services and communities, and is also a member of World Beyond War's advisory board. Welcome, Dr. Hakim.
You can just start the slideshow and you'll be fine.
Just tell me next slide. Give me one minute.
I'll use the remote.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David, and the organizers of World Beyond War conference for giving me the chance to speak a little about the refugee situation. I start off with this slide. You recognize her, and I know that some people may have different feelings about her. But she had said something which caught the attention of my attention and the attention of the Afghan peace volunteers in Kabul, that the politics that's needed to prevent the climate catastrophe is not existent today. We need to change the system. So, on behalf of the Afghan peace volunteers, and I would be presumptuous to say on behalf of 34 million ordinary Afghans, I would suggest that the politics that's needed to prevent a war catastrophe does not exist today, and therefore we need to work extra hard. And these 4 little kids are part of our work in Kabul, Afghanistan. They attend a street kids school, and they are from 4 different ethnic groups. And on the palms of the hands, they have written the word bas, which is really their symbol for saying enough to war. I wish Kathy was here, and she was in Kabul recently with us, the Afghan peace volunteers, and supportive of all the work that they have been doing. Just 2 things I wanted to get us to think about together. And the first is with regards to human rights. And as a medical physician, I lean towards responding first to human needs, and then perhaps we can begin to tackle human rights. Why do I say that? Well, Leo Tolstoy has asked us to think about changing our own human consciousness and changing that consciousness from a law of violence to a law of love. It sounds simple, and with laws, we associate that with rights. Who has a right to what, who does the correct thing legally. So I would suggest that when we look at each and every one of the refugees, that we think firstly and respond to the human need rather than their rights, because the rights can be quite confusing. And we have in this picture Sudanese refugee. And the second thing I'd like to think, us to think together about is that the global refugee crisis I see as the largest non-violent movement in history. Now, I'll explain why I think that's the case. Firstly, in responding to human needs, I will tell a story because life, especially in the traditional oral Afghan society, is about stories. And here, in this picture, you see Ibrahim. Ibrahim also attended our Border Free Street Kids School a couple of years ago, and one day he stopped turning up for school. And we were wondering why. This was a picture I took of Ibrahim at the center then, and behind him, he probably didn't notice that there was a painting done by other volunteers of a ship in the sea, and he probably didn't know that he would have to cross a sea, the Mediterranean Sea. But that was why he stopped coming to the school. He stopped coming because life was getting difficult for him and his family, and he decided that they would leave to seek asylum in Europe. Ibrahim was a good student and very quickly understood our effort to abolish war. So he wrote "Bas" on his hand, "Enough to war," in this picture. Sorry, I will show you this last slide. That for Ibrahim, his journey as a refugee was cut short at sea. And I'm very sad to tell you this because I know him as a human being, that while crossing the sea, along with so many other human beings that have made that journey, his boat sunk, and he drowned. So Ibrahim is no longer with us. Now, how would I, as his friend, or anyone else in the world anywhere, think about this? Did he have a right to travel to Europe? Was it his human right? Did he have a right to life? Did he have a right to a safe life in Afghanistan? And I got very confused because my humanity with him compelled me to think first of all about Ibrahim's human need. I'm going to ask...
I was captain on board the search and rescue ship Juventa, an NGO vessel with the purpose of saving people in maritime distress off the coast of Libya. On my missions did I not only see people drown miserably, but also human rights violations being commonplace at Europe's doorstep. And within Europe, here solidarity with people in need is being criminalized. The non-profit foundation Open Democracy reveals that hundreds of people all across Europe have been arrested or criminalized in other ways for providing shelter, food, and other basic acts of human kindness to migrants. The sobering truth is that today it takes moral courage to show basic human decency in Europe, that it can be a felony to help people in need.
So, I'll tell another story about responding to human needs. And my life turned upside down when I began to work among Afghan refugees in Quetta, Pakistan. and millions of Afghans have fled both to Pakistan and Iran, the home of Foad. And these two neighboring countries have been very, very gracious in hosting them. And Najib in this picture was one of the refugees. And why did he have to flee Kandahar province in the south of Afghanistan? Because following September 11th, 2001, the attack on the Twin Towers in New York, the United States had an excuse to bomb Afghanistan. And they did that. And in that bombing in Kandahar province where Najib was, both his father and his mother were killed. So he was frightened and he flew, he fled Kandahar like any human being would with his grandmother. There in Quetta, Pakistan, he befriended me, and one day I knew he had begun to trust me when he had poked his hand with a hypodermic syringe needle of a drug addict. I washed his hands, his bloody hands, plastered it, and I looked into his rucksack, his sack of needles, and told him, stop collecting needles, you know. He said, well, needles are metallic and they fetch a few more rupees so that I can have some food. Now, he humanized me, like many other Afghans, by offering his friendship to me, his hand of friendship. So I would say, with this other story as well, if we can respond to human needs, if we can encourage all our friends, in wherever we are, to respond firstly to their human needs, and then worry less about the law, because the law, Tolstoy suggests, could really prevent us from meeting those human needs. So one day I decided to ask Najib to enjoy Pakistani mangoes with me. I invited his elderly grandmother too, and in this photo, I asked for him to smile for the camera, like any other foreigner, smile for the camera. And angrily, from behind me, Najib's grandmother said, why are you asking Najib to smile? He has no reason to smile. Don't ask him to smile. That has really changed me. And so I have been blogging this journey of the Afghan Peace Volunteers on a website going by this name, Our Journey to Smile. I think children and people everywhere need to have a reason to smile. That's Najib. Oh, by the way, I have not seen Najib since. One afternoon he came to me and said life was difficult and he wanted to go to Iran. He thought that life was too difficult in Pakistan and that life would be better in Iran. I knew better than that, but I was paralyzed. I didn't know how to respond to him. And I haven't seen him since. Okay, the second thing, and then I'll end my little sharing, that I feel that the global refugee crisis today, numbering 70.8 million human beings, according to the UN, is the largest non-violent movement in history. If we want evidence that non-violence is how we human beings are evolving to be, then perhaps we can look at the large numbers of refugees that are leaving. So 70.8 million forcibly displaced people, and the countries that have the most refugees, Syria currently, Afghanistan second to Syria, and then South Sudan, Myanmar, and Somalia. But each and every one of these refugees have decided to leave based on the fight and flight response. Now, I'm medically trained, and I've been wondering, if I were caught in the same situation as they, would I fight or would I flee? And I grew up in an environment, unfortunately the system of the world, that it is weak to leave. It is stronger to fight back. And I thought maybe that would be the case for most people in war zones, but really, most of them choose what I see as a non-violent option. They flee. They don't want to fight back. They don't want to kill those who are killing them. And this is not easy because you can see in this picture, the Taliban, they are ruthless just like any other army in the world. They shoot to kill. So in the face of such a dilemma, would I choose to flee or would I fight back? There are climate refugees now, and in Afghanistan we can see that because in the northern parts of Afghanistan, water has run out. So out of 34 Afghan provinces, there are 21 that have experienced drought recently. So people are fleeing because there's no water. Or the economic inequality is forcing people to leave the country because there's no work. If there's no work, unfortunately, we human beings have created a system globally where to get food and water, we need money. Now that's a ridiculous system, but we'll come to that another time. In that system, do we flee or do we fight those people who are preventing us from getting money? Okay, I'll end up with these stories, exactly what I was looking for online about 2 Syrian refugees, whether they were going to flee the Syrian war or fight the Syrian war. And here in the next generation of Syrians is Mahmoud, who said that yes, we want to be educated. Schools, unfortunately, there are too few of them. We can't afford to go to school because we want to charge money to earn some money from schooling systems. And so what did Mahmoud tell the journalist? He said, well, when I'm old enough, I will return to fight. On the other hand, we also have another young person like this young man who said that there are different concepts of jihad. Some people choose to study and some people choose to fight. And for him, the option for him is to study. And I would say that that is the non-violent option. So I'm going to end off now. I know my time is up. I'll skip In'am, but I'll tell you that In'am, I may not see him again in Kabul when I return to Kabul from the UK after this conference, because he and his family has chosen to leave as well to Pakistan. And then Bismillah, in this picture as well, my Afghan family has a message for you with Islamullah.
Many of my relatives have been killed in war. I feel sad that many people noticed Afghanistan only after Trump claimed he could wipe Afghanistan off the face of the earth and kill 10 million Afghans in 10 days.
We feel worthless. Why aren't the people of the world concerned about us all?
Then we realized that we are also not concerned about people in other countries. We human beings are disconnected from one another's lives and this. Despite our smartphones, the internet and Facebook, we don't really know one another.
To us, this is a social emergency, like the climate emergency.
They share the same rules, that we are disconnected from nature and one another. So, we wanted to do something together.
We and the Afghan Peace Volunteers have organized the Relational Learning Project, and we need your help.
We hope that as millions arise to care for our planet, we can also arise to care for one another. So, join us at relationallearningproject.com.
Yes, thank you very much, Hakim, for that very thoughtful and moving presentation. And it's good to see that there's some people here who are very involved with Afghanistan, as we remember 18 years of war with Afghanistan. So our last speaker for today is Pat Elder, who is also on World Beyond War's Board of Directors. He's the author of Military Recruiting in the United States, and also the director of the National Coalition to Protect Student Privacy. And he's very passionate, working very hard to eliminate PFASs, the foam firefighting chemical that's very polluting. So welcome, Pat.
Thank you. I have a very sobering message. You can see on the screen, and I'll ask you to actually read a couple of these screens, but I think an existential threat is posed by the use of firefighting foam on United States military bases. And I mean an existential threat to all humanity. These chemicals are killing us. You know, the United States military, through its reckless use of these chemicals, which I'll explain shortly, is poisoning people. They dig massive craters. Sometimes the craters are 200 feet wide. This is routinely done across the world. They fill these craters that are a meter deep with jet fuel. They light them on fire, and they douse them with hundreds and sometimes thousands of gallons of carcinogens that are then allowed to seep into the groundwater, which are then allowed to seep into the surface water, which are then allowed to seep into the sewer systems, which are then turned into sewer sludge and slathered on fields that poison food. And when that doesn't work, they incinerate it, and we breathe it, and we can't get rid of it. You know, the United States owns Germany, it seems, and the U.S. military wants to poison the German people if it does. Well, they can. They poison the water and the land and the air in Germany. And meanwhile, the German people seem to accept it. Here they are celebrating 100 years of American military presence in Germany. I'm not much of a chemist, but I understand that when you take an atom of carbon and you fluorinate it, that is the strongest bond in all of chemistry. When you take 8 carbon atoms and you surround them by fluoride, you create a molecule that is the most powerful molecule, the most inert ingredient, the greatest firefighting element, the thing that will repel dirt and grease better than anything ever developed by human beings. Imagine the military applications. Look, throughout the world, the United States has military hangars. They load the sprinkler systems of these hangars with thousands of gallons of water and foam. They mixed it, and they are able to cover a 2-acre hangar, 17 feet of foam in 2 minutes or less. And they do it routinely, just to make sure that if there ever is a $120 million F-35 that catches on fire, well, they can put it out in a few seconds. And they've made a calculation, and that calculation is simply that the value of an F-35 far exceeds the value of human life around the world. This is in Kadena, in Okinawa. My God,
they're poisoning the Okinawan people. I know Joseph Esther is here today, and he can speak to that. He knows what's happening. It's a horrible situation. Yes, thank you. You should see the picture from the air. I have it on a slide where they show, where it shows clearly the landing strip in Futenma and in Kadena, where the people live on top of the military base. And the routine use of this stuff poisons the water, and it poisons the groundwater, and the people are drinking the water and becoming sick. I don't know if you know the Greek mythology too well, but the story of Icarus and Daedalus. And Icarus is Daedalus' son, and Daedalus says, look, you know, we can take these wings, man, and we can fasten them with feathers and wax, and we can fly. But don't fly too close to the sun, because if you do, you'll fall to your death, son. But Icarus did not heed his father's command. And it is like Pandora, who was warned not to open that box, and she did. DuPont Chemicals. DuPont developed this material in 1938, and it's an amazing thing because German scientists in 1938 figured out how to split the atom. So you have two amazing inventions within a few weeks of each other in 1938 that both caused existential threats to humanity. I'm not over-exaggerating this. These are existential threats. Our bodies can't take this stuff. We have no way to break it down. These carcinogens cause liver cancer, they cause kidney cancer, they cause all kinds of developmental effects in children. They're very poisonous, perhaps the most poisonous elements we've ever developed. And it continues. But it can put out this per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, can put out fires. If you lace the foam with these substances, it'll put out a fire better than anything. And so all around the world, the United States military practices with abandon using this stuff. In Guam, the drinking water contains 410 parts per trillion of PFAS. That's short for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. State of California just passed a law that says you can't have more than 5 parts per trillion. You get a notification level. Your water has carcinogens in it. A team of Harvard professors says 1 part per trillion is potentially damaging to health. And these people are drinking at 400 times that level. But let's cut to the politics of it here. Public health is caught between a rock and a hard place. If the United States government classifies these chemicals as carcinogens, if they say that they are contaminants, then the Department of Defense will be forced to clean up the mess they've caused, and they'll be forced to take care of the human misery they've caused. And that cost, I estimate, is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And the EPA, under the Trump administration, is making darn sure that doesn't happen. So it's still not regulated. It's okay to poison the water of millions of people around the planet. And not just water. Not just water. In Michigan, to give you an example, at Wurtsmith Air Base, which closed 31 years ago, these contaminants don't break down. They're called forever chemicals because they don't break down. People that are eating are told they can't eat the deer because the deer meat is carcinogenic. And this is after a base that closed 30 years ago, and the deer are drinking from the runoff from the old base. In the meantime, and this is a letter that I think I'll simply read, the state of New Mexico is suing the United States Air Force. New Mexico is leading the country in fighting the Department of Defense. And New Mexico is saying, hey, you are poisoning thousands of our cows because, you know, they irrigate the land and the cows are drinking the water and the cows are dying. And the state of New Mexico is demanding that cattle raisers destroy their cattle. And so the state of New Mexico is suing, not just for that, but also for rebuilding, municipal waterworks. And so here you have, read it below, the United States Air Force acknowledges the receipt of the notice of violation. Thanks, New Mexico. Dated in 2018, issued against Cannon Air Force Base. Based on our review of legal authorities cited within this notice, the New Mexico ground and surface water protection regulations do not apply to the Air Force, and the New Mexico Environmental Department lacks authority to enforce the cited regulations against the Air Force. So basically what the United States government is telling the people of New Mexico is that we have the right to poison you, and we're going to continue to do it. So this guy had to put 4,000 cows to death, and he can't sue them. This is Spandelen Air Base, and it's in Germany, and so this stuff winds up in the septic system. And the way this stuff works is you drain the water out, you're left with sludge, and then you have to take the sludge and you put it on farm fields. But the government of Germany said to the people of Wittlich land, which is adjacent to Spandelen, you can't put that stuff on the farms anymore. And so Wittlich land said, well, fine, that's a great how do you do. I'm going to sue the United States Air Force. And they were told they weren't allowed to sue the United States Air Force because of status of forces agreements. Those are SOFAs between the United States and Germany. Germans aren't allowed to sue the United States Air Force. And so the German government is requiring Wittlich land to burn the stuff, which is the worst thing you could ever do because it doesn't break down, because we will then breathe it in. And so this is a horrendous problem. This is simply a picture in Ohio where PFAS is routinely incinerated, spreading death throughout the valley. And in Germany, NATO statutes require the United States to return bases in the same condition that they were initially conveyed. That's part of the status of forces agreement. Well, the idea is, you figure out the improvements to the land, and if there are improvements to the land, then the Germans pay for the additional improvements to the land. They take the base back minus the environmental damage. Well, when these SOFA agreements were put together in the early 1950s, nobody was talking about PFAS. Nobody was thinking about PFAS. And right now, within 11 miles of Ramstein Air Base, you have rivers that are contaminated 500 times greater than what the European Union allows. And that's fine, because the source of the contamination is the United States military. And so in Germany, you have different states saying, no, you can no longer eat asparagus, you can no longer eat the tomatoes, you can no longer eat the cucumbers, they're off the shelves, you can't eat them from this part of Germany, because they are forever poisoned from the sewer sludge, and the stuff never breaks down. Same thing in Japan. I mean, look at that base. Imagine the noise. In fact, they're leaving this base to create another one even larger in a pristine and beautiful area. We heard about that yesterday. But the officials in Okinawa are complaining about the poison from the PFAS. And they're getting nowhere with it. They're not even getting anywhere with it with the Japanese government. The Japanese government looked down on the Okinawans. The Okinawans have 70% of all military bases, all U.S. military bases, and they account for less than 1% of the land of Japan. Japanese they're not paying attention. Look, the stuff causes tremendous birth defects. The stuff causes mutations in a woman's womb. The PFAS, if you drink it at several hundred parts per trillion over the course of several years, if you're a woman and you're young and you're stationed at a base and you become pregnant, you're liable to have spontaneous miscarriages, and you can bleed yourself to death. And we have 300 women from one base in America, George Air Force Base, who one woman starts a Facebook group, and out of the blue, 300 women come forward and said, I was 25, I had a miscarriage. I was 23, I had hysterectomy, miscarriage. 300 women who all drank the water from the same base, which is still contaminated today. The water in the area is still contaminated today, and people are still drinking the water today. And all of these women asked for their records from the United States Air Force, and they've all been redacted. We're dealing with a fascist state. This information is from a base, and the information I received was redacted. They're only telling us what they want us to know. And in the meantime, they're involved in a psychological operation. So they have Fox News, and Fox News will give reports. And the reports are scripted, they're written by the military, and they're 400 or 500 pages long, and they're verbatim, and they're used around the country, and they'll say the same things. And it's a campaign to say that you don't have to worry about the PFAS contamination. Well, we're digging the wells from way further deeper. They don't mention the fact that there are all kinds of pathways to human ingestion, and that eventually much of the superficial aquifer hits the lower aquifers, which are then brought in by the municipal water systems. Okay, so how bad is it? Okay, many have died of cancer. Drinking water in Colorado, 7,910 parts per trillion. You got this guy who had 10 of his family members die from cancer, and they were all down gradient. This is not rocket science. The stuff comes out of the Air Force Base. They're giant sewer systems, with the blue rocks that come out. The water comes out, comes to their neighborhood, and it is brought into the municipal water system. They drink it, and they die of cancer. There are another 6 people in his family who have recently contracted cancer. It's just not on the slide. Okay, it's not working. Oh, there we go. Here's another family. Mark Favors, military family in Colorado Springs. 5 kidney cancer deaths recently in the same area of contamination. I'm good. So here's me in England Air Force Base, Alexandria. How bad is it? Well, it just happens to be a predominantly African American area outside of England Air Force Base in Alexandria, Louisiana. I mean, it is poor, and there are African Americans living in shanty shacks all around that base today, and they all have wells. And you know how high their water is tested? Gosh, 123 times. No, this is we're at 10,900,000 parts per trillion. And I can't find statistics on cancer. I can't find statistics on cancer clusters. Nobody's paying attention. And so that's where we are. Here's Shannon Air Force Base, or Shannon Air Force Base, right? and so you have the firefighting phone being used right here at Shannon from a military transport plane. And you can talk to Ed Morgan about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pat, for all the work that you do and the passion that you're showing.
Since I have, I think, 7 or 8 questions, I'll have to be clicking in. But hardship are being perpetuated on Iranian citizens. Economic hardship. Iran needs foreign currency to buy products that are produced outside Iran. Iran gets foreign currency generally from selling oil. When you cut off oil, means no foreign currency, and the value of whatever foreign currency is available increases. And so whatever is imported into the country becomes very expensive. And so ordinary citizens are suffering because of that fact. And the idea behind sanctions is that people get tired of being poor and having economic hardship, so they come to the streets, have demonstrations, and overthrow the government. That's the basic idea. So what the US government is doing is punishing ordinary citizens to achieve foreign policy goals. And the elite in the society, government officials, others are not suffering. Why? Because they have salaries and they're okay. Ordinary citizens are suffering. So when the US government tells you that they have this maximum pressure campaign to punish Iranian government officials, don't believe that, because what they're doing is not punishing Iranian government officials, they're punishing ordinary citizens in Iran. There's a question about Israel. What about Israel violating international law, bombing Iranian facilities? And, that's what Israel does. They bomb Palestinians, they bomb Iran, they bomb Lebanon. And, Reagan did Ronald Reagan in it deals with this hostage crisis at that time, that he had some agreement for the hostages to be released after he became president. I don't know, there was a book written by Gary Sick called The October Surprise, that he was suggesting there was such an agreement. I'm not sure. I don't know enough to answer that question. There's a question on the environmental impact of a war in the Persian Gulf, which is very true. It's going to be devastating not for human beings that live in that area, but also for the wildlife and for the environment. So that's why we need to prevent war, because war destroys everything: human beings, plants, everything. There were a couple of questions on the PowerPoint. If you give me your email or your WhatsApp number, I can forward the PowerPoint to you. It was 121 pages, so it's quite long, and there could be some copyright issues. And one thing I worry about, I haven't mentioned this to David, but yes, shouldn't I mention it publicly? But you have U.S. government that is putting maximum pressure on Iran, and for organizations to sort of promote Iran extensively, I worry that. Don't worry? Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes I worry about David and Leah and others that are dealing with this Iranian stuff, and that goes on Iranian television often. So I worry that, I lived in the United States, and so I used to get visits from the FBI all the time. So I sometimes worry that we get people in trouble. This is the last one. Last week, I tried to be very quick with this. Last week I met two Iranians at a conference in Dublin who told me that Liz rewrote the question because I couldn't read the original. At a conference in Dublin, who told me that the present regime in Tehran needs to declare war on some countries in order to strengthen its control over its subjects. I guess those two guys should be here and sort of answer that question. But already Iran is suffering a lot without declaring war. So you have all these sanctions and difficulties. And whether this government or previous governments, Iran has not attacked any country in centuries. So it doesn't make sense to me for Iranian government to declare war on another country, because that would give a good excuse to U.S. to attack. What Saddam Hussein did, so that attacked Kuwait and then lots of difficulties after that. So it's not logical, I think, for Iran and the government to declare war on another country, because that would probably mean the end of the current government. And generally, governments like to stay in power, not to be overthrown. So I'm not sure if that idea is actually a good idea. Okay.
I got a question about the use of PFAS foam in Burlington, Vermont, where they're bringing in some pretty heavy-duty F-35s. And the Air Force has claimed that they're no longer using the PFAS. Actually, that's not the exact message that the Air Force is giving. It's saying that they're using much more environmentally friendly foam. Now, there are several types of PFAS. One is with an 8-carbon atom chain, and the other is with a 6-carbon atom chain. And the Air Force is using a 6-carbon atom chain, according to a report by CH2M Hill that you can find on the Air Force's environmental website. But this is part of a propaganda campaign that we've seen all across the country. If you track this stuff closely, you'll see that they're trying to explain to us that it's harmless. And we saw this, Ed Horgan again can point this out. We've had conversations with the Chief Fire Marshal here at Shannon Airport, and we've had conversations with people in the Irish government, and they all claim that the stuff that they use is no longer PFAS, or it's no longer harmful. It contains no PFOS or PFOA, the two most harmful ingredients. Thank you very much. And yet, when we investigated further exactly what they use, we found that these are 6-carbon atom chains, aqueous film forming foam, that are highly carcinogenic, and they actually are even more of a threat to the environment because they travel further. And I just got one other about Italy. The United States military is keeping its cards close to its chest as far as contamination in Italy is concerned. They have divulged, however, some contamination statistics in Belgium and in Korea and in Okinawa and a few other places. One final point, there was an article in Stars and Stripes newspaper 3 days ago about Ansbach, Germany, and German officials with the water district are pointing at the United States military, claiming the United States military is lying and covering up the extent of contamination because they brought their own scientists to test the drinking water outside of Ansbach and found that they need the German government to step in and to replace the water systems because the people are being poisoned. Thank you.
The question is, what is the best way to support Afghanistan on behalf of the volunteers, peace volunteers? I would suggest that we can't do this alone. Afghans cannot do this alone. They cannot end the wars alone. And no one country can do that on their own. So my suggestion is that the best way to support is just to build as many human-to-human connections as we can to build those non-violent relationships. And we can't do that even in this room. We just have to tell one another everywhere. Make one contact, make 2 contacts, connect everywhere. Okay.
I feel bad.
Thank you very much. That's all we've, unfortunately, as they say, that's all we've got time for now. But let's show our appreciation for these wonderful. Thank you. And the next section between 4 and 5:15 is the workshops and discussions. And then there's 5:30 to 6:30 is reports back from the workshops here. And then followed by, at 8:30 tonight, there's a screening of a wonderful film. In between that, there's a lunch, there's a dinner break, and just to let you know that we've booked some tables in the main carvery if people want to get together and buy their own dinner, etc. That there's some tables in the main area. Now, David is just going to explain where all the workshops are.
Thank you. It's a terrific session here. I just want, because the thing